Welcome to On Your Own Terms. I'm Patty Talbot, and this is the place where we learn together what it takes to change the world on our own terms and in our own special ways. Today, I'm honored to introduce you to Amy Rowlinson. If you haven't met Amy before, you're in for a treat because she is an amazing podcaster and amazing coach around helping people find and express their why, their purpose for what they do. I met Amy through the One of Many Women Network. I happened to be fortunate enough to be seated at a table with her one day during an activity at one of many retreats in Stratford-upon-Avon in April of this year, 2023. Amy told an amazing story that day, and I'm not going to tell it to you because she shares it as part of this interview. But just let me tell you that I was moved and inspired by the magic of the way the universe works and the way that we are often connected to our ancestors and those who come before us if we're looking and listening for the signs. So I'm going to introduce you to Amy now so she can tell you her homegrown solutions for the patchwork world we share, and I will meet you on the other side. This is Amy Rowlinson. Amy, thank you for being with us.
I was grown in the country, and the country being two different various parts of the UK. So I started out life in Hertfordshire and then I moved up to Warwickshire. And I think that was a really important part of being born in the country and spending a lot of my childhood out in the fields, wild, swimming and making dens with other children in the village. And we would literally get up in the morning and disappear for most of the day, take a little lunch with us and disappear off on our bikes with the dog. And it was just an adventure. Every day was obviously we're at school for the most part, but when it was the holidays, we were doing things like that and fishing or swimming in the river or doing all sorts of fun stuff. And I think that has stayed with me, that sense of adventure, being sporty, being outside all day, being connected with nature is really important to me. And I had a really close relationship with my grandparents, my mother's parents. Both my parents worked when I was little, and I spent a lot of time with them. They were both working also, but I spent time in the garden. My grandmother would walk me around the garden or walk me around the village and describe all the flowers. And my grandfather would sit with me and we would do logic problems and read together. And I explored the world as a very young girl, and I really felt that I had all my sort of curiosity needs met by my grandparents particularly. So we all have these questions, these why questions, and I continue to have them, as we'll talk about later. But as a young child, I definitely made the most of the people I spent my time with. And I feel really lucky to have spent such a rich environment with them as such a young child. And then moving up to Stratford-upon-Avon when I was 8 years old. Now, Stratford-upon-Avon is most well known for being the land of Shakespeare. And so growing up in a town where Shakespeare was revered, and I would go to plays probably from the age of about 9 or 10 all the way through, well, still continue to go and see Shakespearean plays. So Shakespeare's been a big part of my life. I even went to a grammar school where it was supposed that in the music room that we used to study music, it was where Anne Hathaway was proposed to by William Shakespeare. So who knows if that's true, but the building was certainly old enough and it was within spitting distance from her home. So it would make sense that it was part of that world for them. But it was a really grounding experience to be brought up in a town where one of the most famous playwrights, who had an incredible grasp of human culture, of human nature, and understood a lot about why we do what we do, why we are who we are, and to evolve, to grow, to learn, to educate. Education was a really important part of my formative years, growing, learning, pushing myself to explore more, to understand why people do what they do. I have a podcast and I launched it back in 2020, right at the beginning of lockdown. Something happened which triggered this new podcast idea. It was my business partner at the time and I were thinking about how we could take our current business, which was in property investing, and take that into an online version so we could train people, we could have a network that we had in person, we could take that online. But he decided that he didn't want to do it anymore. And we also had a podcast. And I love the podcast. I love coaching people. I love training people. And when I looked at what I'd been sharing online and what I'd been talking about, actually, the property investing was a small part of what I really enjoyed talking about. It was personal development, it was growth, it was understanding more about who you are. And so my whole life took a different direction. And I was disappointed. I'd spent a lot of time and effort building that company up with my business partner. But actually, with reflection, it was 100% the right decision to make. And I knew that I loved the medium of podcasting. We had put out at that point 64 episodes, really successful, had gone around the world very quickly. In fact, even today, 3 years later, even though we haven't put any episodes out there, it's still charting across the world. So that's the power of content. That's the power of a podcast. So I knew that podcast was something I wanted to continue with, but what would it be? And so within a week, so this is the 23rd of March that we had that meeting. It was the first day of lockdown in the UK. And by the 1st of April, I woke up with an idea. And that idea was focus on why. I thought, what does this mean? What is it I'm doing? And within a month, the show was launched. And it was very easy. It was really easy because I reached out to a handful of people. And by the time I launched on the 30th of April, 2020, I had recorded over 30 episodes. And I knew, oh, this couldn't be a weekly show. This had to be, I had to put out several episodes at a time. Otherwise, people would be over a year before they would get heard. That's what I did. I was recording and releasing 3 episodes 1 week for the following week, which is a ridiculous amount of work. But at the time, we weren't doing anything else. Everybody was available. Everyone was very keen to share their purpose, their why on the show. And so it really took hold very quickly. It became very popular. And I've now reduced it to 1 a week. And then I also do my reflections episodes after every 5 interviews. It's now in 131 countries. It's 3 years later, and next week is my episode 350, which by the time this goes out, it will be even more than that. But I love it. It's a way of connecting with people. It's a way to hear incredible people, what they're doing from around the world, to share their stories and to have people from all walks of life share their uplifting, their really inspiring purpose. It helps other people to understand that maybe their life at the time is not as fulfilling as they want it to be, that there's an opportunity for them to kickstart and to look at what they could do in life. And this is where I talk a lot about purpose, that you don't find it, you create it, you build it. And this is a purposeful choice and responsibility that you yourself have, that you can take forward. And then, my goodness, when that happens, so many doors open. I work with unfulfilled people and I help them to avoid midlife crises and instead create midlife beginnings. But it's not just midlifers that I work with. It's a variety of people who at any point in their life looking to really push and explore and venture into a world that maybe they've been feeling they're living on autopilot and that there's a lot more that they can give. It's about contribution, a way to collaborate with others. It's a way to take control of your life, because having experienced that sort of autopilot and just going with the flow and realizing that a lot of what I was doing was to please others, was not for my own purpose, it was for other people or working for other people at the time. And so I took control of who I am and who I want to be. And it was a real capturing of my values, of my beliefs, and understanding more about me, and then choosing that way forward, stepping into this whole new way of living, which then enabled my husband to retire, to spend more time with us as a family, because it was something that wasn't working. The dynamic at the work at the time, he was working way too hard. He was heading towards burnout, and he was really poorly. Knowing that we had the choice and that we didn't have to go with the way that the sort of the system is dictating that you have to follow that route, we then decided to create our own way forward. And with that, I had to find ways of doing that. I built a property portfolio that allowed us to have an income from a different route. Instead of having to work, we then able to have a more passive income. It's not entirely passive because having a property portfolio is a business. It's important that you run it properly. But it was committing to this new way forward, to understanding that we could then take the purpose element. I love coaching. So now I'm able to spend my time coaching and also mentoring. So I help people from a coaching perspective with their life purpose. And from a mentoring perspective, I help people to launch podcasts. So there's two different strands to what I do. But the contribution that I now am able to affect comes out through the work of working with individuals and giving them their opportunity to explore their purpose. And the ripple effects that come from that are huge, as are people who create their podcasts, because as it's a fantastic format for people to then reach so many people. My show is in 131 countries now. And what does that look like? Look, I've got this globe, and on here are all my little pink dots. And you can see where people are tuning in, which is just fabulous because it really reminds me every time I'm speaking into the microphone, hey, that's where people are listening from. And it just really brings the world just that little bit closer to me. I don't want to be that one person that sort of finds like-minded people and stays comfortable. So I like to be challenged by different ways that people are thinking. I like to be in the company of people who are diverse, who are thinking differently. It's one of the reasons why I am a member of the Professional Speaking Association in the UK. In fact, last year I was the president of the region in the Southeast. And what that allows me to do is people are speaking on different topics that I might not be exposed to had I just stayed with like-minded people in my space. So by having different networks and going to different network events and hearing other people speak really fuels the diversity that I seek, which because we're all different. We're all here and we're all here to do different things in the world. And that's what I love about my podcast, is I see it as being a curator of stories and having a living library of purpose pioneers. And what's so marvelous is that I love observing people. Who doesn't like people watching, right? But my superpower is almost recognizing what makes each of us unique and spotting blind spots and spotting talents and strengths that people may not even recognize because they just assume that everyone has that. But when I'm spending time with them coaching, it comes out in the sharing of what they're doing and what's important, what they stand for, what they stand against. And that's what I love. So connectedness, I believe that we're all this part of this one big giant jigsaw, and that the world needs us to find our place in that jigsaw. And I'm a bridge builder. I love to see the vision that we can all hold, and I aspire to building a better life for everybody. Two of my biggest values are connectedness and diversity. Ever since I can remember, as a young child, being asked to blow out the candles on my birthday cake and being told that I had a wish. And that wish couldn't come true if I shared it with anyone. Now, I'm a little bit older now, so I know that might not be true, that if I share it, it's okay. But I used to, every year, believe that I wanted to be magic. So you just chose about that magic wand. And I thought, oh, my wish was every year I'll be magic. Now I realize that magic comes in different ways and that there is so much magic in this world. And I believe that my chosen mission and responsibility as a podcaster and a life purpose coach is to gift this living legacy of inspiration, of insight and knowledge to create these long-lasting positive global ripple effects. And that's why the podcast for me is so important, because it's not just me having a conversation with someone, which I love, by the way. It's then what then goes on and happens afterwards. So it's the reflections with actions. And I purposely speak to my audience and ask them to share with me what it is they then go on to do as a result of tuning in. So it's not just, hi, guys, this is great, listen to this episode, because it's, I want you to share with me what it is that you then took from that particular episode that you are then going to apply to your life afterwards. And the reason I do that and have that sort of desire and request is because then people take it from a different framework. Now, I, after every 5 episodes, have reflections with actions as my own personal episode. By having my own episodes every 5, I get to share what I believe in, what I'd like to do, what I think I've heard from the episode, what sort of strands I pulled on, what golden threads I weave between them. And as a result, it inspires other people to say, "Oh, I didn't hear that in that episode. That's really curious. I'm going to go back and listen again." What happens is I listen to that, I reflect, I then take action, because nothing happens unless you take action. It's all very well taking on board new learnings, but you have to apply it. I've been wanting to write a book for several years, but I didn't want to write just any book. I wanted to write a really special book. So I put a bit of pressure on myself, like, what is a special book? Why does it have to be so special? And the reason I wanted it to be special is I wanted it to be unique. And of course, I didn't want to just regurgitate other people's opinions of what purpose is and how to live a life with purpose. And here are the several steps that you can follow to create your purpose in life. And what happened to me last year, a couple of things were really special. Firstly, I was going through my grandmother's things after her death, and in a box in the corner, she didn't have many possessions left. There was a box with George, who was my grandfather's name, on the side of the box, and in it were some precious things that belonged to him. And one of those items was a journal that he kept. He calls it his scrapbook, and this is it, his commonplace scrapbook. And you can see the date there, and that was 1939 to 1945. He kept a journal of 5 years during being a prisoner of war in World War II. And he managed to transport this particular journal between 4 different camps and wrote in it, not daily, but quite regularly. And it is beautifully written. And it was literally his being notes, his reminiscences, his impressions, criticism, commentary, and work in progress or unfinished. Now, I've taken on board the journal entries. I believe that there are so many learnings of this young 20-year-old who is having to live in a prisoner of war camp and work out what the meaning of life is. He talks about why, he talks about a sense of balance, he talks about purpose, and using various sources of literature and whatever he had to hand around him, marking down the idiosyncrasies of other people around him as well. He was able to make sense of his world and make sense of the world. And together, we're going to co-write a book about purpose. And it was my framework with my ideas. But the fact that I spent so much time with him as a child, the fact that I believe that he put me on this course in life, and it's only when you look back that you realize that all of my love of literature, of Shakespeare, he was a playwright, so he used to write stories, and he was brilliant in that. He would tell the most incredible stories. So that's what I want to do. I want to be able to share his story, our story, the story of purpose and what that means. So it is a personal development book, but in a slightly different way, because I'm going to be using his stories. What I also found this year, when I was going through my mum's loft and some various other things, was a tiny little envelope. And in it says Amy and George, 1990 on the outside. So I would have been 15, almost 16, wondered what was on the tape that I found inside the envelope, tiny little tape. The dictaphone that I had to play it on, the particular technology, didn't work. So I had to order a new one, or a new old one, because they don't make them anymore. And that arrived on the 15th of April. Now, that is my grandfather's birthday. I put that tape into the new dictaphone, put the batteries in, press play, and there I am asking my grandfather questions that I would like to have known the answer for my book about purpose, about his time as a prisoner of war. You can imagine that I got quite emotional finding that tape, because it just reinforces that this is the project I should be doing right now. This is the reason I am where I am right now. You asked me about my homegrown, my solutions, my patchwork, my whole philosophy of life. I feel like everything's coming together, and this amazing magic exists out there, because it really is very special to be embarking on a project and then also have some findings find me again from all this time ago. We're looking at sort of 33 years ago. I had the foresight to record the conversation with my grandfather. So my episode 350, I've put together a compilation of my thoughts, a couple of his excerpts from this particular recording, to share with people who are interested in what we're putting together. And in his book, because I kept thinking, is it okay? This is quite private, some of these thoughts. Is it okay that I'm publishing it? But at the end, it states in his journal that a future chronicler must share this. So I feel I do have permission. I am his granddaughter. I would not be here today had he made some different decisions during World War II. So it really is a story of an unheroic soldier, in his words, not mine, who surrendered and was then held captive for 5 years. So it is a beautiful story that I would like to share, because at the same time, there are parallels that you can draw with Viktor Frankl and his time in the concentration camp, albeit there was a big difference, because Viktor Frankl went into the camp already being a psychologist, or already understanding a lot about people and understanding a lot about meaning. And so when he came out of his time in prison and published his Man's Search for Meaning, it became the book that we all know to understand around meaning. And I think that's probably why my grandfather didn't publish anything, because he didn't have the same kind of gravitas and knowledge and scientific background. But actually, there's a lot of parallels that I can bring to the table, that I will be sort of sharing, because both of them were practicing the art of living. And that really was quite impressive. And that's what Viktor Frankl said. It's essential to keep practicing the art of living. And that's what he did. So my focus is now to bring this story to the world. AmyRowlinson.com is my website, and that's got a way of contacting me directly there. There's a form you can fill in if you want to share anything with me. Likewise, I'd love you to tune in to Focus on Why, the podcast. It's on all platforms. You can find it easily. And also, if you are on LinkedIn, that's my preferred platform, or Instagram, but LinkedIn is probably where you'll find me the most. My focus is to not live my remaining days in the pursuit of happiness. It's all about a focus on fulfillment, and I'm spending my time as alive as I can be on this planet. And it really is a absolute privilege to be able to hear people's stories about their purpose, to bring together them on the podcast, to connect with people. So if there's anybody out there who feels they would like to share their focus on why with me, please do.
Thank you, Amy. I am amazed by who you are in the world and by the way that you're spreading your message far and wide through your podcast. I can't wait for that book to come out, that partnership that you have with your grandfather, and learn through his words and yours more about finding my own purpose in the world. It is quite inspiring to learn that there are others in the world who are offering messages and interviewing people on a weekly basis where they get to tell their stories. I have much to learn from you about that, because I like to think that this show, On Your Own Terms, that celebrates changemakers and supports changemakers and hopefully inspires others to be changemakers too, has something of a similar purpose to yours, where you are helping people speak their big why out into the world. Because we know from our research about changemakers that reflecting outwardly your why, your purpose, and your intentions as a changemaker is one of the ways the world is indeed actually changed. Folks, can you see how Amy's work exemplifies all of the characteristics that changemakers have in common from our changemaker framework? She is being a changemaker. She's doing the work of changemaking. She's connecting with others for change-making purposes, and she is reflecting outwardly into the world what she stands for and helping other people to do it too. Take a look with me now at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Can you see where Amy's work is supporting the advancement of those goals? Quite possibly even all of them, because she works in partnership with others to allow them to share their big why. Their big why could have something to do with number 1, no more poverty. Number 2, no more hunger. Number 3, good health and well-being. Number 4, quality education. Number 5, gender equity, or any of the others. Because one of the reasons that I feel so simpatico with Amy is that her work in partnership supports others in their work if their why relates to any one of those goals. If you're doing change-making work in the world or aspire to, Amy's right. You must first speak to your why. What's your reason? What's your big purpose? I want to draw you back to our original change-making framework from several years ago when I was first digging into this question. What's the difference between a good person doing good things and a change maker who has the possibility to ripple out with their efforts to make the world a better place? This indeed is the difference, because people working for a purpose are good people, and we need lots of those. But when we add that connecting quadrant across the patchwork, that's when we have a possibility of making a bigger difference with our why. It's a tall order, and no one person can do it alone. But when we work together in partnership with people with diverse ideas coming together around the table, we can indeed change the world on our own terms and in our own special ways. Next week, I will introduce you to another change-making woman who's changing the world on her own terms. And in the meantime, may you be grounded in your beingness, guided in your doingness, generous in your connectedness, and inspired in your reflectiveness, so you can consciously change the world on your own terms and in your own special way. I'm Patty Talbot. I'm always learning, and I know you are too.